Hello, everyone. Dr. Allen here. Hope you're having a great week. We're starting week 3. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Again, I will do my best not to babble too much, but also keep this within that 15, 20-minute time frame. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. We are in week 3, and this week we're going to look at the integration of curriculum and instruction. Just a brief overview, and then I do want to talk a little bit about the some approaches, how international obviously other countries look at curriculum. I'm actually going to have a few videos up I'm going to reference when I'm doing the PowerPoint that you will be able to watch if you're really interested in that. And then I will talk about our assignments this week, which are a discussion and a portfolio that you're going to make. I haven't had a chance to look at the Wakelets. I'm sorry, the Wakelets, the Padlets. You're going to make Wakelets this week. I have not had an opportunity to look at the Padlets as of this recording. It's Friday, but I hope to kind of jump right in there on Monday. I did sneak a peek at one or two that came in and they looked great. But as far as like a deep dive, I guess I haven't had a chance to do, but I'm sure they're wonderful. Also, just in case anyone missed it on the announcement, I do apologize. I accidentally put discussion 3 up under week 2 when I was over spring break because I was trying to get it up. I left both up there. You were welcome to work ahead. As long as you have one of them done, I'm fine. I just left them both there. I'll probably, if there's someone that hasn't done week 2 but did week 3, I'll make sure that they're both up. That was totally on me. I clicked the wrong discussion board and threw 3 up a little early. And because it was already there, I didn't feel right taking it down. So as long as one was done during week 2, we're fine. And same thing with week 3. Totally a me problem, not anything that anyone that's watching this did. So with that being said, I'm going to jump on down to week 3 here. There's actually 2 short PowerPoints that I'm going to do. I'm just going to highlight what's on them. I'm not going to try to read them word for word. And just full disclosure, I also teach our ed tech class here at Shepherd. And this week, the last couple weeks, we've been talking about AI. I took some of my PowerPoints and put them into something called Gamma to see if I could get some charts. So I'm experimenting a little bit. It references Gamma at the bottom because I did use that to kind of put the charts in there. It's actually a pretty cool tool if you are teaching in the classrooms, if you want to try to jazz up your PowerPoints. I'm still fiddling around with it, but just in case you see that word, that is what it is because I took what I had and put it in there and it made charts. I asked it to do that. It's both scary and cool. So, and so let's just go ahead and jump right in. First thing I'm going to talk about is if you looked on our syllabus, there was something related to the integration of curriculum and instruction, and I guess interconnecting learning experiences. Again, I'm just going to kind of highlight this a little bit, but a lot of this is actually relating to integrated curriculum and just trying to do that in your classroom. It's so easy when we're teaching. I'm guilty of this. I was guilty of it when I taught middle school. You kind of go through the day, obviously, in that compartment, those silos, like I'm just doing this. Nothing else that you do relates to this. I'm not saying you actually think that. This is sometimes how people teach. Again, integrating curriculum and the instruction and making things practical and interconnected is what we're talking about with this. So, as you can see, this is one of the cool graphs that it made. Really it is the idea of integrating different curriculum and teaching content areas with similar or a streamlined teaching method. This is something I think, especially in higher ed, that we struggle with. I think again, when I taught middle school, I worked with my middle school ELA teacher, and a lot of times we would do integrated lessons. I think they just went hand in hand, and the students did learn so much more. We used Animal Farm, and I taught about the Russian Revolution. It worked great. That's just a very base level example, but I think it's kind of that concept. In higher ed, sometimes I think we do get a little sidetracked where I do it when I teach my education classes. We're just talking about these theories. Okay, make sure that you're applying them in the classroom. How can you apply them? How does this relate to what I'm teaching? It's all about this, the learning experiences. And again, maybe it's field, maybe it's internships, maybe it's things like that. But all of this, if you can somehow get that interconnected part together, it helps with a deeper understanding. I guess the easiest way I can explain it, I used to even tell my middle schoolers this because they would complain about a class. They might complain about my class. And I would say, listen, when you go through life, you're not going to go through this is the math part of the day. This is the history part of the day. This is the science. It all interconnects. And I think if you can get that integration in your lessons and in your instruction, it just strengthens everything. It strengthens understanding. Now, how do you do that? There's a lot of different models. Don't worry if I go a little quick. These are posted. One thing you can do is have something that's thematic. For example, the example that I used was water. And you can talk about it in science. If you're talking about water, you can talk about ecosystems, conservation. In social studies, you can talk about access to water, the cultural significance of water, and you can do a language arts application about how to write with water, write about water. I don't know if you can write with water. Even you can even look at math. I didn't put it on here, but math, I was thinking after the fact, what countries are suffering from a lack of water, and you can look at those amounts because you can get it, especially when I was thinking about the continent of Africa, or how much water is going down, or even like our water levels going up by how much. So there's a lot of ways to do this, and I think if you can do things like this, it does strengthen your curriculum. And I'm sure a lot of you already do. You can also do project-based learning. Again, nice little pyramid that it made for me, but I'm just going to get right to the point. I think more than anything, when you're integrating curriculum, real world problems and real world connections are the way to go. It makes it real, so to speak, real world problems. It's real. So, internships, practicality. Again, I'll use an education class as an example. One thing when I go out in the field, something a lot of cooperative teachers mention is they're pretty good, but they need to strengthen classroom management. They're pretty good. They need to strengthen classroom management. That's true. Listen, when I started teaching, my classroom management, I'm sure, was not the strongest. I know it wasn't. Actually, it probably took me 2 to 3 years to start to feel really comfortable with it. But you don't get that strength until you have that real world experience. And there's some things that you need to integrate in your classes that might be able to do that. We're looking at ways to do that, whether it's simulations and things like that. But again, real world problems is what you want to get to. But as you can see here, the pyramid's got this where you want to apply it, you want to build the skills, you want to integrate the subject matter, then you want to apply it. You can't just like kick them into the pond or throw them in the pond and say, go get them, tiger, and swim. Though some people think that's the most efficient way. I don't. So let's scroll on down. Again, here's interdisciplinary teaching. And as you can see, here's some examples. But again, maybe teaching subjects or plans together. I mentioned Animal Farm was something. Maybe you do a little bit more co-teaching. I see a lot of teachers do this, where you're taking that theme and you're working on it together. You plan together. I think that's huge. Again, whether you are in elementary, middle school, high school, or higher education, if you can plan with your colleagues, I think it helps so much because you can get everyone on the same page and you can share ideas. You can address, maybe you're struggling meeting a learning objective or can't think of a way to do it. You may have a colleague that has a wonderful idea. You can coordinate assessments. It's just a very efficient way to go. Boom. And then finally, probably the most popular, or at least the most famous, is the concept. It used to be STEM, now it's STEAM integration, where you're bringing all of these things. You're bringing science, technology, engineering, arts, and math into the classrooms and ways to do it. Again, that is an integration of the curriculum, and it's something you need to be aware of and try to do. So, and of course, there's place-based learning, which this is working right in there. I mentioned this, but this is doing field work, civic engagement. In social studies especially, this is where we're really aiming to do. You want students, not just when I taught, a lot of times there was like days of learning or day of caring, and students would go out and like paint something. That's great, but for me, with social studies, I want students to actually take part in like maybe a governmental process, or maybe like, work and run papers and communicate with government officials, things like that. I'm not saying, by the way, community work isn't popular, but actually getting hands-on experience doing things that apply to the subject area, obviously very, very important. If you can do any of these in your curriculum, I think it is super, super, super important. But but some things to keep in mind. Start small. I cannot stress enough to keep relevant in the field. Professional development is very, very important. Even if you're teaching for 30 years, you don't know it all. I'm sorry. And I hope I don't offend anyone by saying that. Things change, concepts change, technology changes. It's good to stay fresh. And usually, I always felt like that I have no scientific data or anything like this. Sometimes I always felt like the teachers that were really with it were those ones that were kind of between year 5 and maybe year 20. And that's no knock on anyone that's teaching over 20, but I mean, just a lot of times they're still doing the professional developments. Sometimes, not all the time, people get so comfortable in something they don't freshen up their ideas or their approaches or what they're doing. They're saying it's worked. I'm sticking with it. It may work for you, but it may not work for your students. So again, professional development, always important. And of course, if you're doing any of this integration, make sure that it aligns with your standards. Of course, at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to meet. And again, try to work with collaboration. Try to do things with people. Sometimes take a chance. You know, it may not work the first time. What do good teachers do? They reflect. And you might say, well, we need to do this, this, and this next time. So I know that was a very blast through thing, but this PowerPoint is up if you want to look at it. But it's the implementation strategy. Next up is diverse perspectives. This one has more, not as many graphs, but it's still got some good comparison type charts, I guess, so to speak. But I'm going to highlight some things on this one. When I say diverse perspectives, we're talking maybe international, other countries. So I want to highlight a few things with that, and even at other states. I wanted to point out one thing I had just seen at a recent conference. So just to kind of give you an idea on how we've set up a lot of the things or a lot of the methodologies that we teach with, you know, at first, and Dewey talks about this if you're a big Dewey proponent, but that factory model emerges where it's very Eurocentric. You know, it's just everything it's a factory set. You go in, you teach, you learn, you sit in a chair, you know, you write, so and so. 60s and 70s, that's when multicultural education kind of comes in. If you're familiar with, obviously you'll be familiar with this, fields such as sociology started to take root. And again, I hate to always use social studies as an example. I'm just most familiar with it. I do know historically when social studies was kind of coming about in the 20s and 30s, everyone just took history. And then, you know, they kind of supplemented it with geography and civics or political science. Well, in the 60s and 70s, sociology and psychology started to become more and more prevalent in terms of electives and in the curriculum for social studies. And that I think makes sense because that's where a lot of social change was happening in the 60s and early 70s. So that's when the multicultural education movement really took root. I would say from the 1990s through now, there's definitely been more of a trend towards more globalization type curriculum and exchanges, more comparison of test scores and collaboration in terms of how to deliver things. So, you know, that's just kind of a broad stream, but this PowerPoint is probably rooted more from a 90s perspective and present. But this is all very nice, and you can look at all this. Of course, what I'm just going to highlight, and again, I don't think this is groundbreaking stuff, but when you're teaching, I don't care, again, if it's middle, elementary, higher ed, you really should be striving for a student-centered learning environment. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And I'm not even going to sit here and say there aren't times that things might be a little teacher-centered, but you definitely want your environment to be student-centered. It's that hands-on learning. So again, I use the idea of classroom management. You know, we still want to get students out in the field and learn how to do that. If you're doing something, if you're doing science, obviously you want to do labs. You know, when even if it's going out, like I worked in a school that was right in the middle of Martinsburg for a long time. When we would talk about West Virginia history, sometimes we would just go out and walk to some of the sites that we were talking about because there's so much history that was associated with the curriculum that I was teaching on the standards. So again, the main thing, and I think this is something that, especially in the Western world, I should highlight that. We're going to do a quick comparison on the Eastern world. Western world is definitely more student-centered focused today, or at least that's the goal. I should say, before I jump into the international, I'm going to put something up if you're interested. It was a challenge TV show, and it's a little reality based, so I don't know how much is um, um, acted, I guess. I shouldn't say they're actors, but maybe how much people are acting in front of the camera. But I thought it was very interesting. They bring teachers from China to teach in a UK school. And the UK kind of has a lot of similar approaches that we have in the United States in terms of student-centered learning and things. And they basically took one group of students and they kept their UK teachers. And then they had another set of students had the Chinese teachers. And in China, things are, I guess, well, probably more down here, more traditional, what we think used teacher talks, students listen, students take notes, and such. They did a comparison on how the two sides or how the two groups of students did in terms of testing and performance-based type things. Even some of it was arts-based where they put on performances. I won't ruin it on which side actually, I don't want to say one, just like what the results were. But if you're interested in it, I will put that up. It'll be on the Brightspace page. But, there's a lot of different groups. I'm not going to get too much into this that influence international perspectives on education. The UN should also, something that I should cite. They have an educational wing. UNESCO is another. But I just wanted to throw this one up. And again, I'm not going to get too bogged down on this because there's a video up that I think might give a little more detail. But Finland versus Singapore are two countries that I think are compared a lot in terms of how the teachers present information. And by the way, you can see this is a nice little chart that I would have never been able to make on my own. But I put this in. It was pretty neat. Anyway, they if you look, Finland is a very unique country. The video that I actually have posted up is from some of you may know who he is, some may not, and hopefully it doesn't discourage anyone. But it's Michael Moore. He's a documentary guy. He definitely does tilt left. But the 10-minute clip I have on is really just him. It's really just an overview of Finnish schools. And it's still pretty interesting, no matter, I think, your political allegiance, just because it does give a pretty good summary of what's going on there. It was made pre-pandemic, and I've read where they've had to readdress some things in Finland since that was made. But just to kind of give you an overview or philosophy, Finland is always seen, especially in the Western world, as the education group. That is the country. Classes do field trips there. They actually have some pretty unique approaches. They are very, especially in early ed, play-based. Students do not actually start school until they're 7. The days are shorter. They also don't, it's not on here because I always think this is interesting. In high school and middle schools, sports are not associated with schools. They have club-based things. So students do sports. They're just not associated with the schools themselves. That's actually a lot of a European thing also. A lot of their schools don't. The teachers have a lot of trust. So when they come up with their curriculum, they can teach it the way that they want. I will say they have a more national-based curriculum or standards. They have a small amount of standardized testing. I will say, and actually they talk about this in the video, and it's a little bit misleading how it's edited, I think. Someone said they don't do testing, or we need to cut back on testing in the United States. It implies that they do no testing in Finland. They do testing, they just don't do testing to the amount that we do in the United States. That's why we know that they're getting good results, because their math scores are very, very high. Their reading scores are very, very high. Their students speak like 3 or 4 different languages. They also don't have a whole lot of private schools. Of course, there's a lot, their tax rates are higher, and also there's trade-offs to some of this, but I definitely watched the video. And the Singapore example is kind of what I was just talking about with the UK video that I'm going to put up, and the Chinese teachers. Their standards are much higher, and they're more traditionally based. They have high stakes national exams. It's a little more pressure packed. I think these pictures I do like because I think they do show the difference where the students are kind of learning together. This is very Dewey-ish, I think, and very student-centered. This is more, you know what, you know, there's a goal in mind. So, and as you can see, centralized curriculum control. Teachers, you know, they know what they want to see, and you might be pathed off on different ways, or might be tracked, so to speak, is a term we use a lot. There's also a lot of culturally responsive curriculums that are starting to appear in a lot of places in the world. New Zealand, a lot of the Maori, their curriculum is starting to kind of address more issues with that. I think we sort of do this. As a social studies teacher, I think we could do it still in a much, much better fashion. But you know, Native American history, how we teach it is it's definitely changed even over the last like 20 years. And the same applies to Canada. South Africa is very interesting because of the post-apartheid reforms that have taken place. So a lot of their curriculum talks about historical injustice. I'm actually just wanted to make the point. I went to a session, I think it was probably 2 years ago, and I thought it was interesting where it was some speakers from Hawaii, where Hawaii, like a lot of states, they have struggles in certain areas of their schools, but they get a lot of people who move to Hawaii to teach, and they like Hawaii, but they don't end up liking teaching in Hawaii because the native population of Hawaii has different concerns, I guess is what I want to say. And sometimes there's not a connection there that I guess some of the teachers are looking for, just because they don't quite have an understanding of what students or where they're coming from or what the students' concerns are. This isn't every teacher that goes there, but it was an interesting presentation. And I think I still have some of the notes on that in the presentation PowerPoint. I may actually share that because the speakers actually shared it with me because they wanted to kind of get the word out. So I'll put that up. And of course, as we start to, you know, globalize and the world does shrink with things like, of course, the internet and Google and AI and all this other stuff. It's very, very cool stuff. Makes communication very simple, but it also makes things very, very complex sometimes. You know, you have to ask yourselves, you know, how much of a global curriculum do you need to have versus a local curriculum? How much flexibility do you need to have in your classroom versus a standardization? And I'm saying classrooms, maybe we're also talking counties, maybe we're talking schools. How much technology do you integrate? Again, I mumbled this 100 times in this class. Sorry, I do struggle with this a little bit. You know, I'm trying to adapt to AI and I'm trying to use it because I'm seeing it so much more. How much do I do that? Because I don't want my voice. I kind of like this because these are my PowerPoints. I'm using the technology. That's as a teacher. If I had students in my class, how much technology do I want my students to use? Technology is a tool, right? But they also need to be aware of the technology because it's the world we live in. So, excuse me. And of course, we want to make sure everyone has access to the things. And that's something I should have highlighted with Finland is it does seem like their schools, everyone pretty much has equal access to materials and funds and things like that. So it's not quite the have and have nots that we sometimes see in some Western countries, with Finland being a Western country, but other ones. So again, there's a lot of ways, you know, the future, what does it hold? Obviously, the world's going to continue to shrink. I think I like this one there, and that's why I put it on there, that cross-cultural collaboration that kind of falls into a little bit of that cross-curriculum aspect, and having integration where you're dealing with things from multiple points of view, and maybe you can bring it in. You know, I was just thinking, so many people use the metric system. You can bring things into that with social studies and have people experiment with that and work with that, and students. I say people, students. So anyway, I know that was two very rushed PowerPoints, but I wanted to kind of just touch base on them. Excuse me. Now, I'm going to have some videos up. I don't think I can play a video on on YouTube. I think it actually flags it. I have put the link up for the finished video. I would really, if you're going to watch one thing, I think this is the thing I would like you to watch. Just because it's very interesting. It's about 10 minutes long, if at that. And it just gives you an overview. It's a few years old now, but I like it. I will put the UK thing up also if you want to check it out. But most importantly, you're probably saying, okay, what do I need to do this week? Well, let's jump back to the syllabus. And if you look here, sorry, I jumped ahead. You have to do a finished model. View the video on Finland. Watch this video. You need to do discussion 3, which will be up. That is on the essential eights. The essential eights. The essential 8. And that is in the readings. And if you look, basically what that concept is the author Harris of Plan Like a Pirate. She has 8 things that she tries to do whenever when she teaches every day. And I just kind of wanted to get an idea of, do you have like a checklist in your mind of what you want to do as terms of approaches or planning? And just kind of if you thought this was a good list. I won't read it verbatim, but there they are. I had typed them up and I see a couple people have already answered. So, just thumbs up, thumbs down. That's the essential 8. Now back to the syllabus. And let's go down here. And if you go down, we have something called the e-portfolio. I'm going to have you use something called Wakelet. If you have me for EdTech, you may be pretty familiar. It's very, very easy to use. But I want you to create an e-portfolio of international trends in curriculum and pedagogy. Now, when I say that, and I'll type this out so you kind of have an idea of what I'm kind of looking for, but you can just pick a country and kind of talk about their trends, or you can do a comparison of countries. I just want something a little focused. So for example, if you wanted to do Sweden, since it's next to Finland, what are some articles on the educational system in Sweden, and just kind of give a summary on that. So let me just go to Wakelet. I'm kind of babbling. So for example, just go to wakelet.com. I'll move my face. I think I need to log in. And I never remember my password. Hopefully I put the right one in. Wakelet's pretty cool, and as you can see, I use it a good bit. I'm not here to hype up Wakelet. Other than I thought it would be just a nice, easier way for you to do some stuff. What I want you to do, just pick an international issue or a country, and I want you to just kind of find some articles, 10. I'm going to hold up the 10 related to that. So it might be if you're doing, I'll say this. Let's say China. If you were doing something on the Chinese educational system, you might find like 3 or 4 articles just about the Chinese educational system, and you'll put them in the folder. Just a brief little summary. And then you might find something related to the teaching techniques within China. So maybe if it was something that's more stand and deliver based, why lecturing isn't good or why lecturing is good, you might put those in there and just state why you thought it was connected. You might have 10 things related to China itself. But to make the portfolio, I was trying to see, I thought, oh, there's one. Like, for example, this was something on the French education system I was starting, and you see, it was a comparison. But I thought I had one that was really, really good. I'll send a sample. I did a sample, and it might be under a different login, so no worries there. But for example, create a collection. You can do this however you want. I would just say do a blank collection. And you're going to give it a title. And we'll say education in the UK. And the following, and oh, by the way, you just need a Google account to create this. The following articles links are related to the UK educational system. By the way, if you're teaching a specific content and you want to look at it from an international perspective, that also works. So maybe you're finding things, maybe again, well, you know what, I'm not going to do social studies because I always do that. Maybe you're talking about teaching science, internationally. So maybe you have an article on what they're doing in the UK, what they're doing in China. That's fine, as long as there's that unifying theme. So, but here's what you would do. I have no clue what's going to pop up when I do this, but let's just say, education in the UK. And we'll see, let's do I want a broad stroke one. This is something that was related. I don't like that article. That looks a little. Let's do a more refined search. Teaching history in the UK. There. So there's something from English Heritage. They do a lot of the castles in there. So this has a little bit on their backgrounds and 10 reasons to study. I think that's actually kind of interesting. And it kind of goes into teaching. It's got their standards. I've looked at this page before. So let's cut, copy and paste. And when I do this, I just click here and I paste and it's there. And it actually gives me a little summary. And then when you do your next one, you just, you can add something there or you just add another one. So for example, let's go back. I probably should rename this teaching history in the UK, but that's okay. Oh, there it is. The history. I like the standard one. That's probably a good one to have. This is an article. I could download the PDF or I can just simply copy the link again. And I'm going to put this here. And you can see it did that. So that's a little, I don't like how that looks. So let's delete it. That's all you need to do is click those little dots. Let's go back. And you can put YouTube videos up, by the way. I have no problems with that. I like this. This is a governmental report. So let's hit this. There you go. And again, I don't care if you put YouTube on here, videos. So we saw the Wizard one back there. And this is one on there for overview. I'm not going to click that. I'm just going to hit that because again, I don't want to play and get flagged for anything, but we'll just click it and paste it. And you see it puts the video right in there. So you just need 10 things. Ones like this, if you notice, I'm pointing at it like you can see it. Most of the articles give a little like summary. You can actually give these. So if you did this, if you wanted to just say, there you go. It gives that summary. That's fine. That's the card. It's on there. So when I click it, I'll see that. Just make sure there's just some sort of explanation. But 10 things around the theme. Again, it can be your content from different countries' perspectives. I'll expand on this when I type it out to you. Or it can be a country, but I just want 10 things in there. When you share it, you're going to supply the link just like the Padlet. You're going to hit publish. You do need to publish it. And then when you share it, you can view it. You're just going to hit copy and you're going to send that to me. So copy the link. That's it. I know that was a mouthful. I've tried to keep these as short as I possibly can. I will send out a detailed summary of all this too. Thank you very much. I know sometimes I'm rushing through. I'm trying to get everything in one video and not make it overly long. If you have any questions about the Wakelet or discussion 3, feel free to contact me anytime. And I hope everyone has a great week and I will talk to you later. I'm going to stop my share and say goodbye.